Hello, my name's Denis Hall. We're at the 5th of September 2022, and this series of videos, which will be the first of them, will tell the story of the 23 years that I spent as the proprietor, the leasee and proprietor of Oruawharo Homestead. And so I'm just going to show you some pictures because that's the best I can do. I haven't figured out how to scan them, and if I did figure out how to scan them, I don't know how I would load the images into here, so please bear with me. So here's the homestead. It's a bit difficult for me to get it in exactly the right place to make it look right. I'll show you several others just because I can. This is that sort of great. This part of it here was the an addition which was put on in 1899. Here's another picture here. This is just a series of pictures of the front of the building, and you can see the wisteria on the end here, and a big lemon tree in front of this room. It was really was lovely place. And it still is in a way, but it's not quite what it was in the past, which is a bit unfortunate, because all of this foliage is now gone, which is sad. I just don't get why anybody would do that to it, but it looks like it's got no pants on now. But this is when it had pants on. And so it's very famous for some of the woodwork inside it. And this is just the main staircase. Unfortunately, this photograph's not a good one. It's got this couch in the foreground here, but you know, that's the main staircase. And here is a picture of the ceiling in the ballroom. Which way up? Here it is. The ceiling in the ballroom was one of the things the house is famous for. This astonishing room, which was actually built as a billiard room. And just a thing of interest about this picture while I've got it, just in the middle there's a hook in the ceiling that people used to make jokes about. But when the nuns took over, they hung a fluorescent light from there. And these lights here, you can see the lights were cut off there and there, which is a part of the history of the place. And there's some conjecture about who and why and whatever that they cut them down. But I've got some better photographs of this. I'll have in another one of these videos. I'll be better prepared next time, but I want to do this today. And so I'm going to keep this under 15 minutes. And so, but you know, basically, Christopher Rollison was the person who was supposed to inherit the homestead, and had he not died, I would never have lived there because he would have been the man of the house, not me, which is the way it should have been, really, so it's a bit bloody sad. But he is said to have died in a tractor accident. I would dispute that, but however, that's something for another part of this series of little documentaries. But Christopher Rollison was... you know, I mean, I had some ridiculous series of events. I ended up as the master of this house, whereas he should have. And as much as I've researched him and know about him, I think that's really bloody sad because he was, you know, and people in the district really believed that he was going to be the big hope for the homestead and for the Oruawharo station. And so, from what I can work out, the brief history of the Oruawharo station was that it was. When Sydney Johnson died, I'm not sure exactly when, I did know, but it's not on my brain right at the moment. It must have been divided, you know, that big land holding must have been divided up between daughters, and so Agnes Rollison was the one who got the chunk of land with the homestead on it, 2,500 acres, I understand. I think that the De Stackpool family might have got a chunk of it, whatever. They can correct me on that. I'm not going to swear by any of that. But so the homestead ended up with less of a farm supporting it than what it had in the past, and it did suffer from that because you know, there obviously wasn't money available to spend on it. But they spent a lot of money on in 1899. to create this amazing room and so forth. But after that, not much. And so, there's some pretty rough work on it that was done at the time. One of them is a big lean-to that runs across the back of the building. And I believe that was made with demolition materials, partly with demolition materials that came out of a servants wing that they had demolished. And inside the building there was some changes that were, I would have thought, substandard, and they're still there, easy to identify. And it would have just been, there would have been no budget restrictions in 1900, but by the time they were doing some of the alterations in later years, there obviously were some budget restrictions. And so to some extent they show, and also if you consider the history of the 20th century, World War One, 1418, and then sometime in the 20s there was a deep recession which culminated in the stock market crash in 1929. We rolled into the to the depression for all of the 30s. End of the 30s, 1938, 39, it looked like a war coming up, and of course it did, through till 1945. And at the beginning of that, or prior to that war starting, Christopher Rolliston was sent, who was the heir to the place, was sent overseas to go to Sandhurst and become a military officer. He did that, become a tank commander, and did the Battle of Normandy. So he went ashore at, on the Normandy beaches somehow, with tanks and whatever, and they liberated Normandy. They were part of that. They were part of liberating Belgium, and then Brussels, and then on down into Europe. And I've just found a documentary about tanks, which I'm going to watch in the next couple of days, and that talks about the Grenadier Guards, because he was in a Grenadier Guard tank regiment. And so he came back in 1947 to New Zealand, stayed a few days, weeks or whatever, months, did a couple of odd jobs, and then he took off to Kenya to marry his sweetheart, her name was Jennifer Lind, I think. He must have met her in Britain. Married her early 1952, and they had a child late in that year, and they returned to New Zealand, and in March 1953 he died in this apparent tractor accident. So Mrs. Rolliston dealt with that, and I'm going to discuss this series of events in a later one of these videos. This is the little quick. This is a very quick history. But she then subdivided the house off along with the stables paddock, the big front paddock, and the Green Park, and bequeathed it to the Catholic Church, I think as an atonement for Christopher's death. Gave it to the Catholic Church. They put nuns in there for a while. The nuns were there a short time. They left the Catholic Church. Something had happened to cause that. I think I know what it is. I'll talk about that later. Not today. And the Catholic Church took over. They stayed there 3 years and then shot through. But the nuns shot through, and then the Catholic Church stripped the place out and had a big sale on site and sold everything that wasn't nailed down. And so the Catholic Church had got that place fully furnished with everything in it, and they sold the lot. And they sold everything down to the curtains and the drapes and the light fittings and the bloody lot. So they virtually, so for anybody wanting to pick it up again after that, would have been looking at $100,000 at least to put not even proper furniture back in it, but to do, imagine what those big flash drapes would have cost, and they would have sold for bugger all. But Catholic Church is a bit like that. Yeah, I said that. Catholic Church is a bit money hungry, and so Oruawharo suffered for that. And so then so once they'd sold everything, they handed the property back. Either handed the property back or got some financial recompense for handing it back to the trust. So suddenly Mrs. Rolliston's dead, of course, and so Kevin Mackay, the lawyer for the trust, ends up with a big empty building, a beautiful building listed with the Historic Places Trust, and he's got to try and do something to save it. And so there's not many options, because you've got to find somebody who's going to refurbish the bloody place, and not refurbish the building itself, but put all the stuff back in it, if you know what I mean. The light fittings and the curtains and the whatever kitchen equipment and blah blah blah. So he gave this lease to Colin Baxter, who was a restaurateur from Auckland, and he spent quite a bit of money setting up a commercial kitchen in there, and furnished it with some antiques but mostly rubbish. And we came along one day after he'd been there 3 years, and I loved the place. Just when I walked in the door, I just thought, this is me. And I asked him if he would sell it. He agreed that he would. Really, we'd literally only been there 5 minutes, and he agreed that he would sell it. So we spent 1966 negotiating and raising money for that, and we bought it in 1977. And so then we moved in and ran into a brick wall where a lot of the locals were concerned, and we didn't know why. But I think I know the reason why now, because there was this bloody secret that had been held around what had happened at the homestead, and that impacted on us. But we didn't know what the hell it was back then, but we do know now. And it's a tragedy, but that's, like I say, it's for another one of these. So I struggled along with the place. I loved it. I just was prepared to put up with anything. I did everything I could to keep that building standing. I painted the outside of it completely twice, and I did it with supervision both times. Once by Resine Paints and the Ministry of Works. So the bloody thing was done properly. And then I painted it again before I left. The whole thing, same deal. Just was what it was. I did it properly. And I wallpapered a lot of rooms, but I mean, what do you do to do up an old house like that? I did everything that I could. You can't. There was nothing that could be done to the major rooms in it, because they were what they were. But we floozied up some of the bedrooms, but I couldn't afford carpet or anything like that. And I did some stupid things which I'll acknowledge in later videos. But I want to finish this one now, because it's got to be under 15 minutes long, otherwise YouTube won't post it. So thank you if you've got to hear and listen to this. This is just the first of, I probably think, as many as 30, which will come fairly soon, some of which are already done. And so once again, it's the 5th of September 2022, and this is just the beginning of the YouTube channel, the Homestead Tenancy, Oruawharo Homestead, Oruawharo Homestead. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.